Hi, Dr. Robert Selig, and I hope you're having a wonderful day as we're getting ready to head into spring in a couple more weeks. And today we're talking about gut health and the infection connection. When I'm talking about infections, I'm talking about those chronic bacterial infections, the H. pylori, the Salmonella, the E. coli, the Giardias, those reoccurring infections. We're also talking about the chronic viral infections, you know, those chronic influenza viruses, the repeated flus more than once a year where it's wiping people out for weeks and couple weeks at a time. So we also have the liver flukes, the parasites, the worms. So all of these infections are issues that we have to deal with if we're going to take our health to the next level. But today we're talking about the yeast, the chronic yeast infection. When I talk about yeast, I'm talking about candida, yeast, fungus, thrush. You can use all those interchangeably. So it's the yeast becoming the beast is the topic we're going to get into today. But before we get into this, let's just start with some basics. We know that we have that we are bacteria, and so this is a concept I want you to understand, and it's always understanding the deeper concepts. You are bacteria. If you're 100 trillion cells, you're at least 10 to 20 times more bacteria than you are cells. So you are bacteria. And so it's having a healthy relationship with your bacteria, which is truly going to determine how healthy you are in your health quest. So we have different types of bacteria. As we know, we have the beneficial good bacteria. We also have the pathogenic bacteria. And then we have something that's kind of like a switch hitter. It can go either way. We call that the commensal bacteria. And this is the area that we're going to influence based on how we live our life. So we always want to have an 80 to 20 proximate relationship of good to bad. And what we're seeing is that the bad is just taking over, and it's usually just the reverse, and this is causing all the chronic diseases and symptoms that I see in my practice on a daily level. So the buzzword in functional medicine is dysbiosis. Dys is bad. It's the diseases, the dysplasias, the dyslexias, everything that we don't want. Bios, life. So it's this microbial life that we're really starting to understand and how important this is on our health quest. So what's causing us to have a microbial problem in our current life? As we're seeing, it's almost epidemic in our culture. So what we have to look at is how stress disturbs the gut lining. When I talk about stress, I'm talking about emotional stress, physical stress, chemical stress. When we're talking about physical stresses, you know, it's the donuts that we're eating, it's the beer, it's the wine, all the alcohols, it's the processed foods, it's the sugars, it's all the stuff we grew up on. So understanding these physical stressors, and the list is numerous. The emotional stresses. You know, when we're talking about emotional stresses, it's we're like the monkey in the cage, the rat in the wheel. We're too busy to sleep, we're too busy to rest, we're too busy to go to the bathroom. So it's this emotional stress keeps us in sympathetic dominance, and we're not bringing up the parasympathetic nervous system. And when we talk about that parasympathetic nervous system, it's always the vagus nerve that mediates how your heart, your liver, your kidneys, and especially all of digestion is so influenced by that parasympathetic vagus nerve. So we're going to understand the emotional stresses, how they cause digestive problems, the physical stresses, how they cause digestive problems. And let's not forget about the chemical stresses, and we've been inundated with probably close to 80,000 toxins into our environment. And you know, we have the NSAIDs that we're popping, the ibuprofens, the Advils, the Tylenols. We're taking that like no tomorrow. The birth control, the antibiotics, the cortisone. So all these the hormone replacement therapy, and also pesticides and heavy metals. These are all the chemical stressors that are really destroying our digestive lining. And it's causing all these digestive problems. So the first thing we see in these digestive problems is, first, it starts as simple constipation. You know, we're seeing a lot of people who are so severely constipated, and typically we should be having about 3 good bowel movements per day, or at least 2 to 3, and what comes in should be coming out. But I'm not seeing that in my practice. So we're also seeing a lot of gas and bloating. We eat food and almost immediately it's causing the gas, the bloating, the distension, the feeling of just being so uncomfortable after we eat our foods, and the fatigue. And you eat lunch at 1 o'clock and you're ready for a nap right after you eat lunch. And so these are some of just the early signs and symptoms of digestive problems that becomes cumulative over time, that leads to more of the insidious problems that we're going to be talking about. So as we start to have these digestive problems, then we go into gut inflammation. Remember, inflammation is the hallmark to all our diseases. And so when we get the gut inflammation, we start to set off this leaky gut syndrome. Remember, in leaky gut, we got the villi, and the villi are supposed to be tightly conjoined together, and all of a sudden the leaky gut starts to open up, and then you have undigested proteins. Remember, proteins need to be broken down to amino acids. When we start to get inflammation, destroys the gut lining, we get the little openings in the gut linings, so those undissolved proteins start to get into the bloodstream. The body sees it and recognizes it as an invader, and that sets off an immune reaction. And we're getting all this stuff that we don't want into our blood, into our blood, causing, systemic problems. Also, with the gut inflammation, our nutrients aren't being absorbed, so then we have to deal with deficiency diseases. We produce, as a result of these invaders getting into our blood, we're producing a lot of antibodies, so we see a lot of IgGs produced, and we get chemical sensitivities. So all this eventually gets to that leaky gut syndrome. And when we think leaky gut, from a Chinese medical point of view, I'm always thinking spleen, stomach. The spleen, stomach is the earth element, and so in Chinese medicine, spleen, stomach are paired organs. So when we think spleen, we think pancreas, we think all the digestive properties that the spleen, stomach rule in Chinese medicine. So then as we develop the symptoms, it starts with the minor ones, and then it progresses to more the symptoms that becomes chronicity. And then we get, the constant joint pains, the chronic infections, the complete brain fog, and the fatigue that just becomes so overwhelming that we start to lose our quality of life. So this is why these digestive problems are so important to understand, because eventually as these symptoms, as this inflammation develops to more of the chronic diseases, then these chronic diseases become the real autoimmune diseases, the diseases that are causing all of our arthritic conditions, our joints are breaking down, we're getting the heart diseases, the cancers. So all of this starts with the digestive system. Remember, Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said, if you want to find the root of all diseases, look to the gut. So I've been saying this for over the last 15 years, how important this digestive health really is. But today's topic, we're going to really switch it now to the fungus. Candida is so overwhelming, and so the problem with Candida, we always have a little bit of yeast in our body, which is a healthy version when it's not an overgrowth of a complete colonization of the yeast. But when it starts to colonize and take over, then it's releasing its neurotoxins. So yeast are going to secrete approximately 70 to 80 biotoxins. It's these biotoxins that slam our immune system into oblivion. And some of these secretions from the yeast are acetaldehyde. That's like it's like alcohol poisoning. And so we get the brain fog, the fatigue, when you're drunk, your brain's not working, you're stumbling, you're not thinking properly. And so we're being poisoned with this acetaldehyde as a result of the fungus releasing this biotoxin. Also, these gliotoxins, a gliotoxin just means it's a mycotoxin, mycology. So these mycotoxins stimulate cell death, apoptosis. When the cell dies, it shreds the DNA. Then when the cell dies, then it releases its garbage into our system, and that sets off a whole cascade of events that we call an immune response. So all these biotoxins that these fungus produce are really crippling our immune system, and this is why we have to understand how important it is to get to the root of these fungal infections. And these fungal infections, that's, the first signs and symptoms of these fungal infections are, you could look at it from the toenail fungus that just doesn't go away, the dandruff. You could look on the tongue and you can see the white coated tongue. It's absolutely the gas and the bloating that we're always experiencing, the food sensitivities. So all these things are a result of these fungal infections that we have to have a deeper understanding to get to the root of it, because this is a stealth enemy and we need to understand it. So not only do these microtoxins produce these microtoxins, they also destroy the minerals. So when we're not making minerals, then we're not going to be able to do a lot of cellular function that our cells need to be healthy. Also creates a serotonin deficiency. Candida binds estrogen, depleting the body of good estrogen, resulting in the toxic estrogens. Now, remember, the #1 age-related liver toxin is bad estrogen. And so these fungus infections are destroying our hormones. So it's really cumulative as we start to see the gut problems, the hormone problems, the sleep problems. And once we start to put all this together, then we can have better strategies for really getting healthy. So this is really how important this candida problem is. And you're seeing children born today, like, when a mother's pregnant, she's going to produce more blood sugar because the growing fetus needs blood sugar for the brain to develop. And we also have this thing now, we have a lot of gestational diabetes. We're producing way too much sugar, and babies are being born with cradle cap, where they have these skin infections and eczemas, and it's because of these fungus infections. And these fungus infections are sophisticated. They know how to hide into the body, and when a woman or anyone takes an antibiotic, kills almost all your bacteria, but then your fungus overgrow right away. You can ask anyone that's been on an antibiotic, and they'll see that they'll have a yeast infection, whether it's vaginal, whether it's in the mouth, the sinuses. It's really wiping us out, these yeast. And this microbial world is something that we have to truly understand, because it's an important concept of how to get healthy, is understanding this. So what are some goals, what I'm looking for? The first thing I'm always looking for is the signs and symptoms. That really is the telltale sign of you have a fungal infection. So I have a lot of my patients fill out a questionnaire. Based on the questionnaire, based on the symptoms, I'll almost be positive that you have a fungal infection. But to back it up, we'll do a blood test. We'll look at the IgGs, the IgMs, the IgAs, and that will tell us that our body's producing these antibodies as a result of a foreign invader. Also, another great test is the stool test. The stool test won't always come back positive, so we have a lot of false positives, but when it does come back positive, absolutely indicative that you have a yeast infection. So we're going to use stool tests, we're going to use blood tests, we're going to use questionnaires, we're going to look at signs and symptoms. So all this will give me a heads up as to what is going on with your inner terrain. And that inner terrain is so important for how we're going to get healthy on our journey to really recovering from all our chronic diseases. So it's an important subject, and also we got to have better strategies when we have a yeast infection, a candida infection, a fungal infection. There's two strategies we need to employ. First, we got to starve the yeast, so we got to cut off their food supply. What's their food supply? It's sugar. It's the alcohol, it's the grains, it's the cookies, the donuts. It's all the foods that we have grown up with and we love, and we become so addicted to it. And so we have to starve the yeast with good nutritional strategies. And the second half to the equation is we got to strengthen the immune system. So when we strengthen the immune system, we're going to come in with, now every case is a little bit different. So we're going to use probiotics, fermented foods, but you can't go too aggressive with that in the beginning stages, because you can set off a whole new colonization of these yeast if we come in too aggressively too quickly with the probiotics. So we have to come in with the probiotics intelligently, because everyone will be a little bit different in that department. We also have to come in with immune boosting herbs like reishi, like chaga, like astragalus. So all of these herbs turn on our immune system. They add intelligence to our immune system, which is so needed, so we can have an immune system that will stimulate the macrophages, the neutrophils, the eosinophils, all of our white blood cells, so they can do the job, keep our immune system intact, so we can deal with these fungal infections. So those are some of the basic strategies and some of the basic concepts that we have to dig deep into to understand how these infections, these chronic infections, are killing us. And for us to really understand this, we're going to analyze the patients on their symptoms, on the questionnaire, on the blood test, on the stool test. So we really will have a good strategy on how we're going to starve the beast and strengthen the immune system. So this was a quick presentation on really explaining to you how we have to understand the importance of gut health. So thank you for watching.